welcome everyone to Rockin' Nation vidcast slash podcast. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. I'm your host, Sam Snelling. As you can see, we're on season 6, episode 29, and we've abandoned Matt Harris in favor of Matt Watkins, joining me from right down the road, down 170 here in St. Louis, a fellow St. Louisan representing the Blues tonight. Matt, how's it going?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
No complaints. Other than a pretty bumpy weekend in the transfer portal for the Tigers. So Matt Harris and I were on last week, and we felt pretty good. So we recorded last Monday. Felt pretty good about Mizzou and Caleb Love. And now Caleb Love's going to go to Michigan. So it just goes to show you, in the days of the transfer portal, recruiting's always been funny, but transfer portal and NIL, I think upsets happen in a quick way. And that got away from the Tigers in a hurry. Initial takes, I think of the three of us, I was probably the most on board with bringing Caleb back into the Missouri fold. I think, the Matts both were maybe less convinced, but kind of on board, I think is maybe how I describe it. Your takeaways of how that went down?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. As you notice, I'm not wearing my Carolina blue tonight. That they'll by the wayside. But no, I would agree that I think Love was kind of depending on what the roster structure is next year, might have been kind of a high upside luxury item. Obviously, Mizzou's biggest need is inside. Caleb Love, obviously not that. But we had kind of talked amongst ourselves about, what would the shape of a lineup with Caleb Love and potentially Isaiah Mosley and potentially Kobe Brown in it, all on the floor at the same time, look like. And, it's not too many teams have that. There are often reasons for that. So I guess it wasn't totally surprising that, with Mizzou, we don't know that those guys are going to be back for sure, but it's not totally surprising that Caleb Love is going to a program that is pretty much turning a roster over that wasn't that great last year and is going to have the opportunity to do what he's been doing at North Carolina and perhaps more as far as shot taking, creation on the ball, etc. So, it came as a surprise. I thought Mizzou was in a pretty strong position, but when you really look at it and take a step back, it's not too surprising, I guess.
Well, right. I don't think like this isn't anything that is dire or bad for the program. I don't really think it reflects anything on on Dennis Gates, the state of the program, like what the plans they had for Caleb. My argument for bringing him in was, one, it was insurance for Isaiah Mosley. I think we all kind of saw what happened with Mosley this year, his sort of not being a reliable member of the team. And Missouri needed somebody who could come in and kind of be a high usage guard. If Mosley is back, like, that need is obviously lessened. You obviously still want to have high talent and NBA level talent, even though maybe that potential isn't realized. But you always want those kinds of guys on the roster. And I thought adding him, having him also be a little bit more of a secondary creator, a guy who isn't relied upon the way he was in North Carolina and our first action didn't work, Caleb, go make a play. Putting him in a more NBA style offense and having, him be not quite like Demoy Hodge, but I think like Demoy Hodge is, maybe played himself into a look as an NBA player because he's a play finisher. And, the NBA, what they're looking for is they're looking for guys who can hit threes. They're looking for guys who can defend. And if you develop into something a little bit more, then great, but you have to be able to defend. You have to be able to hit threes to play in the league, at least as a guard. Like, I think you can get away with some of that if you're, bigger, more athletic, guy. But for the most part, I thought that the marriage of Dennis Gates and Caleb Love was going to be a good one for Caleb's career. I do have some suspicion that that Missouri was probably not going to offer as much as Michigan was when it came to NIL. If it's true that Caleb really wanted to be like the primary guard, then I have a hard time, arguing with making that move. He's definitely going to be like the primary guy to handle the ball, to take the shots at Michigan. Even if Michigan finishes it, so they've already added Burnett. If Burnett gets a waiver and he plays, Namari Burnett. I think the most recent rumor is, dude from Tennessee, just forgot his name.
Kamwa.
Olivier Nkamwa is a possible addition there. So, like, that's one of those things where, okay, now you're starting to build more pieces around him, but none of those guys are, give me the ball and let me run the offense, and that's definitely what Caleb's going to do at Michigan. As for what that means for, Missouri, I don't really think it changes a whole lot to what, their offseason plans. The offseason plans hinge so much around what Isaiah Mosley and what Kobe Brown are going to do. If both those guys are back, then you've solved a significant portion of your production going into the season. What you're looking at doing then is filling in around those guys. I think your point of calling Caleb a luxury item is probably very on point. I think that's why a guy like, John Tonje makes a lot of sense. A guy who can be a complementary piece. Why they're pursuing, some of these, Caden Shedrick, who I'm a big fan of his game. I think he's also a complementary piece. It brings the things that they need. So it's nothing that I don't think like losing out on Caleb Love upsets Mizzou's spring apple cart.
Right.
Like they still have their plans. They're still going to execute and bring in guys that they think are going to help. It's just a matter of who those guys are going to be.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good read. Mizzou has needs, obviously, but as you had mentioned, so much of it depends on what Mizzou brings back. And as of right now, the only two departures that we know of that aren't graduates are Muhammad Diarra and Ronnie DeGray, which heightens the need of what was already a need last year, some bulk inside. So, ultimately, Mizzou's success or lack thereof in the spring portal season will be whether they can address that need and what else they can do. Caleb Love would have been a very nice boost, but again, if everyone were to come back that we think could come back,
he's not fixing the rebounding.
Right. It's like Mizzou was already a very good perimeter-oriented team last year that could really score some points. If Caleb Love were 6'11", 7 foot, and threw shots in the third row, we might be singing a little bit different tune here. But, and of course, depending on roster still getting turned over going forward, that he may have been a bigger need than we know, but we just simply don't know at this point.
Well, also on Friday, we had caught wind that Missouri was trying to bring Fardaz Amak onto campus. I think previously when he was going to Texas Tech, there was some discussion that he was kind of looking for a pretty healthy NIL deal. So I'm assuming that, you know, there was some negotiation probably when they were talking about bringing him into campus, and it seems like that discussion probably went sideways because he ended up going to Cal. I'm not really sure of Cal's NIL situation, but I have a hard time imagining he's making a whole lot of money out there. If you're going to be taking less, at least go take less. Be with your old basketball coach is basically what I'm assuming happened in this case. I was really leery on Fardaws, mainly because the guy that is that big, but also like he's a hefty dude. Like he's like 250, 260, playing with, you know, after a foot injury,
Right.
is concerning to me. Like foot injuries are really, really difficult to get over as a basketball player, but as a bigger basketball player, even more so. I mean, I would have felt better if it was an ankle or a knee than a foot. So he was a guy who was not really high on my list. And now we don't have to worry about it. Another guy that was not super high on my list was Essam Mustafa, who couldn't contain Missouri's interior game when he came to Columbia with Coastal Carolina. But by all means, like a nice player. I think he's probably going to be a rotational piece for TCU. He committed to TCU today. Let's see if I just kind of run through a few of these other folks. Jonathan Pierre was the D2 transfer wing. He committed to Memphis. Cameron Hunter originally had like a top 5 list that he put Missouri in. Ended up committing to Butler. Keyshawn Gilbert, a St. Louis native, ended up at UNLV. Was that Bashan? Committed to UNLV, entered the transfer portal, and he is going to Iowa State. Iowa State had a nice day because they also had Jackson Pavletsky, a guy who I think was popular on our Slack channel chat. 6'3", very skilled, kind of combo guard, really good ball screens, can shoot the ball. You know, good size, good head, ability to pass the ball. Just a kid who looks like he has a high ceiling. He's going to be at Iowa State. Let's see. LJ Cryer, Missouri had made contact. He went to Houston. That was always kind of like an outside thing. I never really thought they had a good shot with him.
I think that was Dan before he even got in.
Yeah, that was. There's a lot of these that you know, they're going to go through the pomp and circumstance of entering the portal, actually going on a visit, you know, having the graphic made up and then committing. But yeah, so he ended up at Houston. Let's see, who else we got? So today was really busy for commitments. Today we had Micah Hanlongton. I always laugh because we've been trying to figure out how to say his name. Hanlongton. It's his last name is spelled Hand-Log-10, so I can only imagine that's what it is. Maybe it's like Hanlongton or something.
I think it's Hanlongton, but it's
we're gonna find out because he went to Florida, so we're gonna face him. So yeah, we will learn probably quickly because I think another guy that we thought you know, sort of a high ceiling big, 7'1", good rim finisher, developing offensive game. So he's going to be Todd Golden's new toy to play with. We mentioned Pavletsky. Kal-El Ware was a guy Missouri made contact with. He left Oregon. Former 5-star recruit, is going to Indiana. So there was a lot of other commitments. Denver Jones went to Auburn over the weekend. I think that's it as far as Missouri making contact, I believe.
Yeah, I think there may have been a few that had trimmed their list, but as far as commitments, those seem.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to make you sad and bring up Tyler Perry.
For the record, I would be very sad. I'm not 100% sure that I would ever rely on that account or the one that I always confuse it for. That those accounts like to peddle a lot of lists, and I'm leery of any account that likes to put graphics with lists on it.
Oh yeah,
Yes, that it did appear to be trending that way, and as sad as it makes me, it does kind of make sense from a Mizzou perspective. Talking about Tyler Perry here, who is an absolute dynamite player, but he is also 5'11" on a good day. And Mizzou is already pretty small along the perimeter, especially on the ball with Nick Honor and Sean East. Now, adding another 6-foot-ish player, I'm not really sure that that's what they're looking for, even though I think any program would probably benefit from having a Tyler Perry on their team. Love that guy.
So then the question is, like, we've been able to eliminate a substantial portion of the list that Missouri has made contact with. So from our board, there are no point guards left. There is one combo guard, and that's Reggie Bass, who apparently is committing, I believe, Wednesday, and there's no signs that it's Missouri. So of course, it will probably be Missouri. But I think there's some stuff going around that might be like Illinois. I know Illinois has been making a lot of noise. I really like today they got Domask and the Utah Valley guard, who's another Chicago native. And then I want to say there was one more.
They had the commitment from South Dakota, who is like a bench warmer. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
If he was a walk-in or a scholarship player, but I kind of chuckled at the highlight video that someone had put together for him. Not that he doesn't deserve it by any means, but that just that that had been
mock-up duty.
Yeah. But yeah, I will slight Illinois. I will not slight the kid.
So wings, Steel Venters is off the board to Gonzaga. We mentioned this year. Yeah, he was another nice player. 6'7", can shoot the rock. A surprisingly good athlete. And
a hell of a name.
Yeah. We had some there was definitely some guys who were at the portal. I would love to just assemble a list of like the best names in the portal. And like Micah Henlogton was on that group. Like I just would love to have even like Hello Ware, Toplitsky, like Hello Ware, like your name is practically Superman's name. So, but still on the board, KCK native from Piper High School, Kansas City, Kansas, Tamar Bates, a guy who could definitely upgrade Missouri's defense. Watkins, how do you feel about Tamar Bates?
We're not going to have Matt Harris drop in the middle of this conversation, are we?
Well, he does have the link, but I have the ability to not allow him into the feed. So,
well, I do like Tamar Bates. Mr. Harris is he's a very big proponent of Tamar Bates, which was the joke. But no, I think in the right context, he would be a very good player for Mizzou to add. As you mentioned, the defense, his shot came around this year. Hasn't proven that he's much of an offensive threat, except for, kind of the Des Moines Hodge game, but not quite as advanced. So it's, again, you're kind of...
He needs a little more time to load up the shot. Like Des Moines could get it off in a phone booth.
Right.
But Tamar is definitely a guy who needs some space.
But he's that type of player, when we're talking about shoots threes, runs in transition, moves away from the ball, that type of player. And he might be more than that. We just don't know at this point. So it's kind of what Mizzou is looking for. If you've got one or both of Kobe Brown and Isaiah Mosley back, he's a great fit. You can't ask for a better fit than Tamar Bates. If neither of them are back, obviously you'd have more spots, but you're kind of looking for someone who's a little bit more proven to make plays, work on the ball, create for others, etc. But I do think he's a good player. I don't think he was utilized that well at Indiana. Not many guards can be when you've got a first-round draft pick pounding the ball and you've got two big guys stationed on the block. There's just not a lot of meat left on that bone.
Right.
So I think there's a lot more to his game than what we know. But again, you're kind of at the point where you're looking at next year's goals and trying to fit pieces into slots. So I think that's the biggest question with Bates in my mind.
So then I think at that point, like we really don't know where Missouri is going to turn on the wing if it's not Tamar Bates. It seems to me that the attention that they're giving is in making sure that they're finding a post guy. That isn't to say that they aren't also recruiting wings. I believe that they are. We don't really have a good clue as to who their primary targets are, outside of some whispers that they've talked to Bates. There seems to be mutual interest there. That mutual interest seemed to kind of kick up right about the time that Michigan was gaining ground with Caleb Love. So maybe Missouri was like, we might be losing out on this guy. Let's go get this other guy. And it did seem like the interest in Bates was at least genuine.
I think so.
But none of Tamar Bates, not Tamar Bates, none of that matters if Missouri isn't able to somewhat solve their interior issues that they had this past year. We did get some good news today, and that or was that yesterday?
I think it was last night.
Was it last night? That Shedrick is actually going to be visiting. He did go to Duke, and like the information that we've been able to gather about this is that he did go to Duke. He is on Duke's board. He doesn't appear to be their top priority, nor does he appear to be a guy who will be like heavily expected to play tons of minutes. So the role being reduced at a place like Duke, and being down the board a little bit allowed him to maybe take a moment and open up and look at some of his other options. The other options on his final five were Missouri, Xavier, Texas, and Kansas State. At this point, he's scheduled visits back-to-back from Texas to Missouri. So we kind of feel like those are probably the schools that are ahead of the others. It doesn't seem like Kansas State is super in there. And Xavier, I think they're trying to get him on campus, but nothing's been scheduled. So it looks like at this point that Missouri is at least in pretty good position. When Dennis Gates is able to get guys onto campus, he seems to do pretty well securing a commitment. That is happening on the 19th, so that is next week. How do we feel about Caden Shedrick? Matt, what do you like about him?
I would say that if we were a group, he would be kind of our cult hero. You look at his numbers and they don't jump off the page, and this is not an analytics versus non-analytics discussion, but he averaged something like 6.5 points a game, 4 or 5 rebounds a game, a block or two. But you have to look at a lot of things when you analyze what he was doing. First of all, Virginia, very, very good basketball team. Tony Bennett is one of my favorite coaches in America. He's an excellent coach, but much like North Texas with Tyler Perry we were just discussing, they play incredibly, incredibly slow. I mean, we're talking, if they could play 60 possessions a game, they're going to play 60 possessions a game. Mizzou, on the other hand, wants to get up and move. If they could play, they would be more up in the 75 possession per game average. And when you look at it that way, I mean, that's a 25% increase in stats, in box score stats, just by pace of play. Another thing about Virginia is that he did not play as much as he should have. The dark side of Tony Bennett, so to speak. It was a well-traveled discussion on the Twitter sphere that Caden Shedrick made Virginia a better team, and Caden Shedrick wasn't on the floor enough, and I believe he averaged something around 40% of the minutes played, which is, 16 minutes a game. And he, the numbers do bear out that he was probably their best interior player, but he was not getting the best interior player minutes. So as far as what I like about him,
there's a guy in front of him whose name was Bennett. His first name was Bennett. And so that was I think, was that Jim Root's joke?
Yeah,
that Tony was favoring the guy who was named after him or something.
Well, Vanderplas, I think, has some connections to the coaching staff there. So he was the player who was getting more minutes ahead of Shedrick, for that matter. But when I look at him, I think he fit what Virginia did well, but I think he would fit what Mizzou does or wants even more. And that's someone who's going to play more, who can get up and down, who can move. Not all 7-footers can move. Caden Shedrick can. He has
great like recovery. And like you can go back and just watch Virginia games and watch him defend ball screens, and how quickly he's able to recover to a post player. And I like that's so much of post defense these days that that's exciting.
Yeah, you've got to have that lateral foot speed to be able to get out in the perimeter and corral guards if you're switched on to one, or to hedge and get back to your big man that's rolling to the basket. He does all of those things well. He obviously protects the rim well too. He's not an explosive athlete, but he's athletic enough for someone 7 foot. And he's very good at timing his blocks too, which is an undervalued asset in my mind. A lot of guys can jump high. It's the ones who can jump high at the right time and not foul that are really important.
Yeah, think of somebody like Janai Broom is awesome at timing his blocks. Like he's not an explosive guy, and I mean 6'10" is not small by any means, but he's not like a towering presence. Like he blocks a lot of shots with unbelievable timing.
So I think those are the things that are most exciting. Offensively, his game's pretty simple. You're not going to confuse Kobe Brown for Caden Shedrick. But he does set screens, he rolls well, he moves well off the ball, he rebounds well, that's a pretty big thing. But I think he would be valuable offensively, but defensively is kind of what gets me excited about him. And I think he's kind of I had mentioned this to you all today, I think it's kind of a unique situation that a high major program like Mizzou is looking for someone and is in such dire need of someone exactly like him, and who's leaving a program because he didn't play enough and wants theoretically to play more. It seems like a really good fit, but it's recruiting. So, if he makes it to Mizzou, I will like Mizzou's chances, but that's 10 days away, which in portal season might as well be an eternity. So.
And I would add to that with the way things work with NIL, you really never know, like why guys are making decisions. A lot of the time is because they're getting really great NIL deals. Not everybody is making the best decision for their basketball future, and everybody is considering those things. And by all means, like I don't mean to denigrate guys that are making those decisions. I've long been a proponent that the players should have this kind of control and be able to, to make money, while schools are profiting off them. They should get a portion of that. But because the money isn't known, we don't know what guys are getting. There's rumors that this guy's asking for this much, this guy's asking for this much, and certain teams aren't willing to pay whatever, or don't have the pool, or they do have the pool, they don't want to spend that much on one guy, blah, blah, blah. Like, all this stuff is so unknown. And because it's unknown, like, we look at, and I still think, like, we're looking at recruiting in a way that it used to be, even when that dark money still existed on the table, like, you're still explaining coach-player relationships. You're still, like, assigning, like, what player would fit into what role. I think Shedrick is a guy with his skill set would work both really well at Missouri and Texas. I understand from a basketball perspective why both of these programs would be really interested in Shedrick. I think there's a reason why he was contacted by 30, 40, 50 schools, however many it was, when he entered the transfer portal, because his skill, his ability to move, all the kind of stuff is just what most college teams want in a big man these days. But until you can sort of put that picture together with what the NIL picture is, it's difficult to know exactly, like, what certain guys are wanting. And I do think that there are probably guys who know that they're destined for professional basketball that maybe aren't looking for the absolute top dollar. But I still think it's important. And you want to make sure that, you want to make sure you're not taking a bad deal.
Right. No, I definitely think that's the case, especially at the upper end of the transfer portal. I don't want to say it's just money, but it's a big thing. When you see guys like LJ Cryer leaving from Baylor, I mentioned Matthew Meyer last year at Baylor. Like, why would you go to Illinois from Baylor? Baylor's a good program. He's doing really well there. I don't think he
developing. He's developed, like, Matthew Meyer in his time at Baylor developed into an NBA player.
Right.
And
so it's,
it's just my take, but he went to Illinois and I don't think he helped his stock. I think he made it worse.
Yeah. And even someone like Hunter Dickinson this year, I can understand wanting to go closer to home if that's what he's really wanting to do, but their entire offense was built around Hunter Dickinson. I don't know what else from a basketball perspective you want than having the ball in your hands as much as you want, and having the entire offense revolving around you. So, I'm not saying this is the case, but it's entirely possible that some of his money that was being used on Hunter is being used on someone else who also wants the ball in his hands next year. And that's, not just the reality.
Well, and I do think, like, that's a good point. And I would also, like, wonder if, and this is something that is probably worth an even, like, deeper discussion maybe this off season. But if you look at, like, every school kind of knows what their their salary pool is, basically. Like, Dennis Gates knows what Lawrence Bowers and his group have to work with. And if he doesn't, he's not doing his job. So every college basketball coach should know, at least roughly, what their setup is and what they can afford and what sort of, like, pools they're working with. And I wonder if Juwan Howard, like, after last year, is like, man, we are giving Hunter a lot of money, and like, we've gotten worse every year with Hunter in our lineup. I think we can win more if we change this up, and we still have big guys. Like, let's look at this Nkamwa guy. He's pretty good, but like, Nkamwa is not Hunter Dickinson. He's not. He's not like the black hole, and I say that in a good way. But the ball gravitates towards Hunter, and I don't think you need that. So with so much of the way the game is changing, maybe Jawan's saying like, look, I can take what we were paying Hunter, and I can get two guys. Like I can maybe go get Caleb, and I can get Nkamwa, and have two really good players who give me a more diverse skill set, and maybe also possibly defend better. Like there's a lot of critics about Hunter's defense, and and so like that's one of those things. Like it's difficult for us to know because it's all behind closed doors. We don't know what player is weighing how much from one school to the next school. I've always felt that the best case scenario for Mizzou is not to just be able to outbid people, but to have a successful coach who puts guys in the NBA on a regular basis, has a clear development plan, and has a competitive NIL program. And I think Missouri is close to that. Do I think Caleb probably got more to go to Michigan? Yeah. Do I think every player, is going to need more money in order to be successful? I don't think so. I think guys that believe in a coach and a plan, as long as the offer is competitive, will probably be more inclined to go with a place they feel like they can develop into a pro.
I would agree with that. And, even if you are getting more money to go somewhere else, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that.
No.
From a school side, you need to use your resources wisely. And it's like any pro franchise. If you put all of your money into one guy and he's good, but the rest of the team stinks, what have you really accomplished? It's great for the player. But
think LeBron in Cleveland.
Right. So it's, or taking it to a baseball analogy, I mean, the Los Angeles Angels, I guess it's Anaheim Angels now, have two best players in baseball, hands down. And they haven't made the playoffs since, I think, 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there. Albert Pujols was a new Angel when they last made the playoffs. We'll put it that way. So yeah, it's having the best team and how you can use your resources to build the best team. And if Mizzou's belief is that Isaiah Mosley and Kobe Brown are going to be the best players on the team, that's a good use of resources, in my opinion. If that means not getting a Caleb Love, if it means looking in the second tier of the big men pool, I think that's probably a wise use. Because once you start taking one of those guys off, granted you have more money, but can you find someone as good as the guys that are leaving your program? So, just using that by way of an example, I think that's something that coaches in college have to be very cognizant about. Granted, you can always say that players are being paid under the table, and they very well might have been, but now that it's for the most part coming in one large pool, and I'm sure every coach in America who is presiding over a program that has an NIL pool knows exactly what's in it.
Yeah.
So it's it's a little bit more out in the open now.
Well, and I think that's why I think we're also big fans of Shedrick, and why we think he would fit is because he's not a guy like Hunter Dickinson. He's not a guy who is going to command the ball on the block. You're going to be able to put him in ball screens and roll. He's shown that he can hit the short roll and hit short jumpers as well. You can put him in the dunker spot. He'll finish that. He'll offensive rebound. So he's in a lot of ways the ideal guy for what Missouri wants to do and how Missouri plays. The other guy that we haven't quite talked about yet is Jamarion Sharp. He's the 7'5" looming figure in the transfer portal. Many people have long pegged him to be a Missouri Tiger. But he's also kind of been focused on training and preparing as an NBA draft guy. Sharp is definitely a freak. He's 7'5". It doesn't make sense that he can move as fast as he does. He can run, jump, all the things that you would think. Like he moves the way Shedrick moves, with like another 6 inches on his frame. So as you can imagine, like that's something that's desirable. But at this point, like there's been nothing out of Sharp's camp or anything about visits or interests. I'm assuming at this point that he'll probably have a lot of the same levels of interest that he did when he entered briefly last year. I know there were some rumors that he was looking at Houston, Memphis, Louisville, as well as Missouri. I say let's get Shedrick on campus, get him signed up, and call it a day. But I think you could do a lot worse than Jamarion Sharp if Shedrick doesn't work out. It's just a matter of whether we can actually get this to happen and not have that carrot dangled in front of you for too long.
Right. Now, I think he's probably the highest upside guy who would fit into our needs. And by ours, I mean Mizzou. When you're looking for a defensive presence, a rim protector, someone who can move laterally and vertically, few can do it like Sharp can at that size. None can do it at that size, but few even at the 7-foot range can do it like that. But unlike Shedrick in Virginia, Sharp hasn't had the benefit of the greatest coaching the last 2 years. And I'm not throwing any particular coaches under the bus, but Western Kentucky was
talking about Rick Stansbury.
Was a very, very, very talented team last year, and they did not perform like a very talented team. And I know there were some health issues with Rick, but Sharp had been there for 2 years, and Sharp wasn't a totally different player from the time that he arrived, from the time that he's leaving. Which is a shame because someone with that skill set with great coaching could be a dynamite presence. And when you're looking at it from someone like Mizzou's perspective, can you make those strides in that short of time to where he could be an elite player? And he might be, but he's not as far along as far as the skills of defensive basketball go. As compared with Shedrick, even though he's got a world of potential. At least my view on it.
I would also add in that the level of strength conditioning training that you would get at a place like Western Kentucky is not going to be at the same level that you would get at Virginia, or Missouri for that matter. I think Missouri is also in that club. So this is one of those things where it's difficult because, Shedrick is already been coached. He has all the pieces that you need ready to go now. Sharp is a guy who can develop into that guy, but you're doing that in one off season.
Right.
Like if Shedrick commits and you're able to get him, like that's your starting 5 next year. And not that I don't think Sharp would start, but right out of the gate, you're gonna be better off with Shedrick. But the interior presence, if you can get Sharp right, and what he can do to change the angles of the game on the defensive end, like that's just impossible to really plan for, to practice for. You can't prepare for a guy like Sharp. because a lot of teams have athletic 6'10", 6'11" guys.
Right.
So that you're used to kind of seeing those, but not many have guys that move the way that Sharp does at 7'5".
Yeah, it reminds me of, what was that, the 2019 NCAA tournament when Central Florida played Duke, and that was Zion Williamson was on Duke, and Taco Fall was on Central Florida, and Central Florida had that game won. I mean,
Yeah,
he was, Sharp and Fall aren't the same player, but they have that same type of impact that a surefire number 1 overall pick who had a great game, but the reason Central Florida was in that game is because they had this just beastly presence inside that could dunk flat-footed. That makes offensive rebounding putbacks pretty easy. Speaking of Sharp, I was watching some film of him the other day, and he stepped out from his position on the block and managed to tip a 3-point jump shot in one step. It's just... It's kind of like a cheat code if you have a guy like that and is locked in and knows what he's doing and is well schooled and everything. But that's a lot of ifs. So, Shedrick is he's an attractive option because you don't have those same questions, but you're giving up some of the size and athleticism. So it's a good debate to have.
we'll be a lot closer by this point next week. Supposedly he's visiting on the 19th, which would be a Wednesday. So we're recording this Monday night, April 10th. Yeah, so we gotta wait until the 19th. On the 18th, he's going to Texas. So we're gonna check out Texas and check out Missouri back to back. Hopefully Dennis Gates has that NIL package and the video package to show Shedrick of everything they're going to do with him, ready to go, and he gets blown away by what Dennis Gates has to offer. Lord knows we need him. But we are going to be covering all the transfer portal stuff as it continues through the week. If there are any other names that come up for Missouri in their wing position or their interior post position, we will certainly be talking about that. Watkins has a little roster piece that he's keeping updated that has everything and who is doing what, leaving, coming in, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're looking at that. And then the three of us really are working on that very, very time-consuming and long transfer portal tracker. That is up to date as of tonight. And we will keep that updated as more guys come off the board. Like I said, I think we've got Reggie Bass committing on Wednesday. And I think Graham Ike, the Wyoming transfer big, is visiting Providence soon.
Kimmy?
A lot of people. Yeah, Kimmy. Hey, he's running it back with George Mason, plus Devin Carter and Bryce Hopkins. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the Big East, man. I don't know. Georgetown, Ed Cooley's gotten quite a few commitments. They're looking good. Big East is looking tough, man. It looks like UConn's going to get Nick Timberlake. So, all right. Is there anything else you want to hit on before we get out of here?
No, I think we basically covered the portal interest. I guess the parting words would be, I tweeted this out the other day. It kind of seems like things haven't been going real well for Mizzou in the portal, but I just caution everyone that last year we were trying our very, very best to cover what was going on, and there were just guys committing to Mizzou that we had no idea were even on campus. I know that happened with Nick Honor. There had been some lists that Mizzou was recruiting him, similar to what we've seen this year, and then all of a sudden we see a bad signal, and Nick Honor is committed to Mizzou, and then we see pictures from his visit. We had no idea any of this was happening. No one did. if we didn't know it firsthand, we would have seen it somewhere.
Well, it's definitely like a big thing to keep in mind is most of the transfers, especially when you're considering the like the high major transfers, guys that are transferring high major to high major. Those guys have already done all this, right? Recruiting stuff. So they had their big announcement. They had like, all the official visits, and, they've gotten to go through that process where they're talking recruiting writers. And a lot of the guys just don't want to do that this time. So now you'll see some of that stuff. Like I think the Cameron Hunter kid from Central Arkansas is a good example. The guy who comes out with like a top 5 list, like I'm going to get, Tip Genetics to put a graphic together of my top 5 list. And like 3 of those schools aren't really like, those aren't committable offers. Cause it's too early, dude. Like you can't commit here. Like we don't know who else is going in the portal. Like he released that list, and then we learned Caleb Lowe went in the portal, Tamar Bates went in the portal. And now we've got Arterio Morris in the portal. There was another portal entry that happened right before we came on, but it's just like I think all this week we're going to see more fairly big names going into the portal. And as long as guys are still going in, like I'm not going to worry about who Missouri has. Like focus on the fact that John Tange is on the roster. That dude's good.
We didn't know anything about him until he committed.
Exactly. So we've got Tange, we've got Shedrick visiting. At this point, you have to feel pretty good about where Missouri sits with Shedrick. If Jamarion Sharp is your fallback there, then like that's not the worst thing that can happen. So let's let it play out. Let's see who else comes in the portal. We'll be back, next week to talk about this again, probably with the other Matt. And so I feel like I kind of cut you off a little bit on your, wrapped up, or would you?
I was just going to start rattling off examples, and I think it's most of the guys who signed with Mizzou last year. That we didn't know. I think we had a little indication that Demoy Hodge was going to be, I don't want to say that we knew he was coming to Mizzou, but I think he might have announced that he was announcing. I could be misremembering that. But Sean East, we kind of had a feel for, but Mohamed Diarra, that was completely out of the blue. DeAndre Golston was completely out of the blue.
Noah Carter.
Sure. We knew Mizzou was on some lists for Carter, but didn't know he visited. Didn't know he.
Yeah, they made his top 5, and he had like visits he was all gonna take, and like went to Mizzou, was like, I'm good. So
it can happen just like that. So anyway, I'm not the ruler of anyone's emotions, but just from a practical standpoint, this is how it goes. And Mizzou's only shopping for 2-3 spots total this year. It's not the 10 that they were looking for last year.
Well, yeah, I think that's another salient point, and one that I think it's easy to forget. Mizzou is not looking for a whole lot. I mean, at most, like they could maybe, and really, we don't know exactly what Kobe's going to do. We don't know exactly what Mosley's going to do. We have a good indication on what those guys will be doing, but realistically, like there's just not that many spots for them to fill with the guys that we know are coming back. So. And as more and more guys continue going to the portal, like you don't know where things are going to end up. I would not start to panic probably until maybe mid-May. Hopefully things are. If John Tange is like your only guy in mid-May, okay, like maybe you can press that panic button a little bit. But for now, like it's April 10th. This, basketball season's been over for a week. We're good. Follow this guy At Data Mizzou, you can see my my Twitter handle there. We're tweeting out all the transfer portal stuff. Down here, I'm getting used to this reverse screen thing, Watkins. But down here is a subscribe button. So please subscribe to this YouTube feed. You can find us on YouTube at Rock'em Nation. You can also find us in any place that you get your podcast, the same way that you have always listened to Rock'em Radio. We are on this new group called Fans for Sports Now. Is our new podcast group. They're helping us out. It's been a really, really good transition. We're very excited about it. It helps if people are subscribed. You can find them on YouTube also, and there's also a Facebook page. You'll get all kinds of updates. So if Mizzou is not your only sports passion, chances are these guys have an awesome podcast just like this one, just for your other favorite sports teams. How about that? Yeah, you can just support us all. So we'll be back next week with more Rock'em Radio and more dive cuts. Until then, thanks for tuning in.
So